all run upon some adversity. We all have some hardships in our lives, but our goal is to be restored. Our goal is for God to elevate us to a place that we're no longer in misery. We're no longer disappointed. So the first thing that we have to understand is bitterness is defined as anger and disappointment at being treated unfairly. Resentment. Can we agree that Joseph was treated unfairly? Joseph, he was mistreated by his brothers. It said that his brothers hated him. And they hated him so much that they couldn't even say anything kind to him. Can we agree that Joseph had the right to be bitter? The word tells us that his brothers, the coat that his father gave him, they stripped it off of him, meaning they stripped his privilege from him. They took it right off his back after that. So Joseph, he had the right to be bitter. And that's all I came to tell you this morning. You have a right to be bitter. But does it do you any good? Will it get you to where you want to be? See, Joseph is an example of what can happen when we decide to get over our bitterness. Understand that bitterness, if you can't work with that definition, see, bitterness is a foul odor that the owner becomes used to after a certain period of time. That's what bitterness is. You've been bitter for so long that you can no longer smell it, but everybody around you, they smell it. Those that encounter you, they smell it. And sometimes people immediately become angered when they smell this stench that's on you. But see, you have the right to be bitter. You have the right to smell this way, but you want everybody you come in contact with to be Christian enough to ignore your smell. You want them to be Christian enough to not say anything to you about your smell. You don't even want people turning up their nose when they smell this odor that's coming from you. And I tell you this morning, the longer you allow that stench to stay on you, the longer you allow that stench to linger, the harder it will be to get it off. But again, you have the right to be bitter. But I suggest to you this morning, you need to get out while you can. Because at some point, it'll be too late for you to get out. Bitterness will have consumed your whole life, but it's your right. You have the right to be bitter. You have the right to smell the way that you want to smell. But understand that you didn't come out smelling this way. You weren't born smelling this way. Something happened to you that caused you to smell the way that you smell. Understand, rape and molestation has caused some people to be bitter. Some people are still bitter because of what happened to them when they were children. Some people were abused when they were children, and they're still bitter about it till this day. Some people were cheated on by their spouse, and now they can't trust men or can't trust women because of what happened to them in their marriage. Some people have been neglected by their parents. Their fathers walked out on them, or their mothers gave them to their grandparents, and now that child can't find it in themselves to trust anybody, and they're grown now. They can't find a loving relationship, all because they're still carrying the bitterness of neglect. Some of us, we were the victims of violence. Somebody was taken from you at an early age, or somebody perpetrated a crime against you. Somebody put a gun up to your head and robbed you, or broke into your home, or broke into your car, and it made you bitter. All right, all right. Some people, this is why they don't like people that dress a certain way, or wear their hair a certain way, or certain skin color, all because something happened to them by someone that looks like that person. And now I'm bitter towards everybody with dreadlocks. Yes, now I'm bitter towards everybody that wears their pants sagging. I'm bitter towards men. I'm bitter towards women, all because of what happened in my past. But understand, whenever adversity comes upon us, we have two choices. You can either live through it or you can learn from it. See, understand that sometimes God meant for us to learn from something, but we just decided to live through it. But when God meant for us to live through something, we were too busy trying to learn from it. Understand that you can't learn from something that you don't have any control over. This is Satan's trick. Satan wants to trap you and keep you wasting time trying to figure out, what did I do as a child to cause this adult to molest me? And we try to learn from things that we have no control over. We have no control over evil. Only God has control over evil. But sometimes we keep racking our brains trying to figure out, how can I have prevented this evil from happening to me? And when we do that, we sit and we blame ourselves and we can't forgive ourselves. And we waste time trying to figure out, what could I have done to prevent this from happening? Understand, evil happens to good people. Evil even happens to evil people. We have no control over evil, but sometimes we keep trying to learn from things that we were just supposed to live through. You were just supposed to live through your traumatic experience as a child. You were supposed to live through your violence and just thank God for the ability to live through it. You weren't supposed to learn from it. There was nothing from you for you to learn from it. The only thing that you could have learned from it was how good God is. Should understand, God has some things in our lives that we're supposed to live through. But we keep wasting time in the ashes of our adversity trying to figure out, what could I have done to prevent this? There was nothing for you to learn from that, but God wanted you to live through it. Understand, we got to take ownership of what we do. Now, when you bring stuff upon yourself, understand that was something you needed to learn from. See, when you went somewhere that God told you not to go and some bad things happened to you, you needed to learn to be obedient to God. You needed to learn to be obedient to the Spirit. Living through it is what will make you stronger. But we keep wasting time trying to figure out, what did I do wrong and what did I do right? And the enemy is pleased at that time, because but when you accept your mistakes, and when you accept the fact that people are just people, and no matter how much you trust people, people will still betray you. No matter how nice you are to people, people will still stab you in your back. When you come to understand those things, then you can move forward. But sometimes we sit and we don't understand, why do they treat me this way? He allowed God to elevate him. So I tell you this morning, you ought to get out while you can. But again, it's your choice. You have the right to be bitter. You got the right to walk around angry all day long. And you have the right to be nasty to everybody that you encounter because of the things that happen to you. You got the right to be bitter with black people for what they've done to you. You got the right to be bitter with white people for what they've done to you. You got a right to be bitter with Asian people or whoever else you want to be bitter with. You got a right to not like children because of what happened to you when you were a child. You got a right to hate teachers because of what they said to you when you were in school. You got a right to be bitter, but you got a responsibility to be better. God charges us to be better. You can't love somebody if you're bitter. You can't help somebody if you're still bitter. The people that God told you to forgive, you can't forgive if you're still holding on to your bitterness. Understand, bitterness won't allow you to offer forgiveness to anybody. Bitterness, it won't allow you to be reasonable. Bitterness will not allow you to compromise. But you have the right to be bitter. But you got a responsibility to be better. In Ephesians 4, verses 30 through 32, it tells us not to grieve the Spirit. If you call yourself a Christian, you have a responsibility to not grieve the Spirit. And the only way you cannot grieve the Spirit, as it tells us in verse 31, is that you have to put away all bitterness and anger. If you don't do that, you will truly grieve the Spirit. And understand, when you exercise your right to be bitter, the Holy Spirit cannot guide you. The Holy Spirit will not dwell in your temple if you exercise your right to be bitter. God will not hear from you when you exercise your right to be bitter. God will not forgive you when you exercise your right to be bitter. But understand, you got to get out while you can. You got a responsibility to be better. But you say, Pastor, I've been here for so long. I've been bitter for so long. How do I get better? How do I get out of this neighborhood that I've become so familiar with? How do I get away from these streets that I'm used to travel? I know everybody on Anger Avenue. I know everybody that I see on Bitterness Boulevard and familiar with these streets. But here's how you do better. You got to acknowledge the hurt. You got to acknowledge the fact that somebody hurt you. Sometimes we become bitter all because we say it didn't hurt. Somebody told you that you weren't pretty enough, and now you believe that you're destined to be lonely for the rest of your life because somebody told you you were ugly and you believe that you were ugly. So now you feel like you are not fit to be married to anyone. So you walk around and take whatever relationship somebody throws at you and you keep being bitter. You got to acknowledge the hurt. Acknowledge that it hurt when your parents walked out on you. Acknowledge that it hurt when somebody molested you when you were younger. It hurt when they fired you from your job without any reason. It hurt when your best friend lied on you and turned their back on you. It hurt. But you got to acknowledge that hurt. Don't walk around telling them, yeah, they did it, but I ain't hurt. I ain't bothered by it. I'm still strong. I'm still moving on. No, you got to acknowledge the hurt. You got to acknowledge that, yeah, they broke me down. Yeah, it got the best of me. You got to acknowledge the hurt. After you acknowledge the hurt, now you got to identify the perpetrator. Some people are walking around taking it out on people that had nothing to do with the hurt that they experienced early on in life. Some of us are taking it out on people that are only trying to help, all because we never put the blame squarely on the person that hurt us in the first place. But we keep putting it on all men, or we put it on all women, or we can't stand all parents. We can't stand all children, all because we didn't identify the person that hurt us in the first place. We let that person slide. But now everybody else has to pay for the sins of that person. Identify the right perpetrator. Don't just try to attach it to anybody that you meet. Identify the perpetrator. You'll find yourself now trusting God for a healing. Now you understand that that person can't heal the hurt that they put within you. Only God can heal that hurt. But God can't heal a hurt that you keep telling God that you're not hurt about. You got to admit that it's hurting you, and you got to allow God to heal you. Give it to God. God will heal you. But the problem is, we don't want to trust God. We think we're going to heal over time. We say time heals all wounds, but understand that time also causes wounds to fester if they're not properly treated. Time will cause wounds to become infected if you don't take care of it the right way. So time will not heal all wounds. It's the proper treatment that will heal wounds over time. Last but not least, you got to walk in your responsibility. Understand that you have a responsibility to be better. You have a responsibility not to grieve the Holy Spirit. The word tells us put away all bitterness and anger. You can't say, well, I'm going to be just a little angry at him. I'm going to be just a little bitter. I'm going to turn my bitterness on and off. At some point, you won't be able to turn that bitterness off. At some point, that bitterness will consume you. That's why I tell you, get out while you can. If you still have breath in your body, you have the opportunity to get out. You have the opportunity to choose better over being bitter. You have the opportunity to allow God to elevate you. Stop thinking about the pit. Can you imagine what Joseph's life would have been like had he been sitting around thinking about the pit all that time? Had he been thinking about how he ended up in Egypt in the first place? My brother sold me into slavery. But you got a right to be bitter. But you have a responsibility to be better. But the question is, who are you? If you're a Christian, then you should accept your responsibility to be better. If you're not a Christian, then I'm not talking to you. You have every right to be bitter. If you truly want the blessings of God, if you truly want the love of God, then you got to walk in your responsibility to be better.